Last December, I drove to North Carolina to help my mother move. I came back to Ohio with a car full of things, possessions that she had but no longer had room for, or other things that she would just like me to have. Among them was a large Rubbermaid box containing some 600 slides. I promised her that I would take them home and scan them all to digital and tell her what was on them. She had a few ideas about what some of them may be, but generally speaking, the last time she had looked at them was probably before I was born. So I got home and opened this huge box of slides. The first thing I saw, which my mother had told me about, was a lot of purchased souvenir slides from all over Europe. Professional images of Buckingham Palace, the Eiffel Tower, etc. The sorts of places where you could pay $1 and get 6 slides to make sure you had the pictures you really wanted. There were about 150 to 200 slides that were bought, and so I really didn't feel the desire or responsibility to scan those slides. So, with the souvenirs out of the way, I got to work with the task at hand of scanning all of the other slides and discovering the stories that this box held, captured on Kodachrome, one slide at a time. The first 100 or so were all pictures taken through the moving bus window of a tour group traveling through Europe. Exterior shots of Buckingham Palace and brilliant images of the Swiss Alps. Many castles that I could not easily identify. Then, however, I hit a section of slides that my father took. It was during his time in the Air Force somewhere overseas in the East. My father, as a photographer, had an eye for airplanes and for candids of people. His slides were filled with images of cockpits and engines, shopkeepers and villagers. And then there was one slide that seemed almost out of place amongst my father's others. It was a simple image of a set of bunk beds. It seemed out of place because within the frame there was no airplane and no people. It was just a set of bunk beds. I was fixated on that slide for minutes until it hit me why my dad would have taken that picture so many years ago. I believe it was to remember that place, to remember that feeling, to remember the reality of waking up in that very bed every day, an occurrence that was daily life for months on end. And yet, he seemed to know that it would not always be. One day, that memory would feel as far away as Thailand feels from North Carolina. And hopefully that image, that bed he saw every day, would be able to carry him through time and space the way that photos can, to that exceptional reality that we often lose in the process of releasing our more mundane memories to life as it continues. It's one thing to take a picture of the thing that you may only see once, like the Swiss Alps, or the plane that you spent months working on. But to remember something as simple and pedestrian as a bunk bed, that can bring us back to the intimacy of the everyday that we so often overlook. As I continued to scan those slides, the majority of them were my mother's, primarily of Europe, with quite a few from a girls' trip to Six Flags over Georgia, including a wonderful image of her with H.R. Puffinsnuff, who she claims she doesn't know who or what that is, and that she's never seen the show, though I have the slide to prove otherwise. See, after I had scanned everything, I called my mom and asked her a lot of questions to figure out where the slides were taken, who was in them, all the details that memories can hold. Those details that photographs can bring us back to. What I quickly put together was that all of these slides in this huge Rubbermaid box were shot in 1971, which was fascinating, seeing my parents in 71. And it was especially fascinating because they didn't meet each other until January 19th, 1975. They seem blissful in these slides, but alas, there is more to the story. We know that because we can see where those lives led. I am proof of where those lives led. And we can see that there are other people in the pictures who experienced those same days and also captured memories, undoubtedly some similar and others different. That's really my favorite part of picture taking, the memories that aren't in the picture, but that the picture can bring up, the context, the who, what, when, where, and why of picture taking, the stories that they remind us of, and the life lived in between them. To look at a picture, and regardless of how tranquil, fun, or blissful it might seem, to stop and say, but alas, there's more to this story. I find it the same when listening to a gospel reading in worship. The sections of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John that we hear on any given Sunday are but a snapshot of a bigger picture. The ones that we can recall to mind most are the ones we have heard most frequently. And yet, to read around the gospel, by that I mean the verses before and after any prescribed passage, helps us with the context, helps us to fill in the picture of what else is going on. Today's gospel is from the 6th chapter of Luke, and is his well-known account of the Beatitudes. Blessed are you, Jesus tells us, 4 times. Before the 4, woe to yous. Though, if we go back to the beginning of this chapter, chapter 6, we see part of a journey that is much longer than one sermon on one mound. Jesus begins this chapter by arguing with the Pharisees about what you can and can't do on the Sabbath. Then Jesus heals a man on the Sabbath. Then the whole party, Jesus and the disciples, go up a mountain where Jesus calls his disciples and chooses 12 of them to be the apostles. Simon Peter, Andrew, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James, the other Simon, who was called a zealot, and then Judas, the son of James, not to be confused with Judas Iscariot, who became the traitor. That is literally how the verse before today's gospel ends. And Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. Talk about a woe to you, eh? Now, I'm sure that moment in and of itself felt really good. The moment when the 12 were picked. The band was assembled. The Kodak moment was there, waiting for the group shot. Oh, how blissful. But alas, we know that there is more to the story. We know what the next 3 years holds for Peter and Judas and Jesus and others. We know that there is always more to the story. Blessed are you, but we know that there will be more to your story. Woe to you, but we know that there will be more to your story. And we know that Jesus is there for all the more that your story has in store. Coming down from the mountain with the newly consecrated apostles, Jesus is there throughout the rest of the gospel. Even when the apostles think Jesus is dead and gone, he meets them on the road to Emmaus, at the table beyond, and all of the rest of their days until God calls them home. Christ was there in Europe with my mother, in Thailand with my father, long before either one of them knew that they would be my mother and my father. Jesus was there, and Jesus still is. So this is what I'd like you to do. When you get done listening to this sermon, or get home from wherever you are, pull out an old photo album, an old slide carousel, that old box of pictures that you have stored away in your attic or garage or wherever, and take the time to look through them. and investigate the images and the memories that they bring up. Think about your life between then and now, the blessings and the woes, and then remember that Jesus was with you every step of the way, and that Jesus is still leading you, still loving you, and still carrying you, especially when you feel like you can't carry yourself. In the moments between then and now, when you didn't know what was happening or what your next step might be, Jesus was there, caring for you when the weight of the world felt too suffocating or ambiguous or ambitious. Jesus was there on that great trip that you took with your friends, when you played with your childhood dog in your parents' backyard, and when your family got together to celebrate life and each other. The power of the gospel this day is just that Jesus is still here, still with us, with you and I. And so, in these moments, the moments that make up today, moments that might seem mundane as they happen, moments probably not captured on Kodachrome and kept in a slide carousel, but rather caught on cell phones and kept on Facebook, on images that we too will look back on one day in the future. And in that moment, then we will be able to remember what God was doing for us now when these pictures were taken, even if we can't see it right now. Amen.